6. I'm reading from verse 1 this morning. 2 Samuel 6, verse 1. Again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people that were with him from the Baal of Judah to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts that dwelleth between the cherubims. And they set the ark of God upon a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gibeah. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drave the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was in Gibeah, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel played before the Lord on all manner of instruments made of fir wood, even on harps and on psalteries and on timbrels and on cornets and on cymbals. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. And David was displeased because the Lord had made a breach upon Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. And David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, How shall the ark of the Lord come to me? So David would not remove the ark of the Lord unto him into the city of David. But David carried it aside into the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. And the ark of the Lord continued at the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. And it was told King David, saying, The Lord hath blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that pertaineth unto him because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. And it was so that when they that bare the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in his place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And as soon as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he dwelt among all the people, even among the whole multitude of Israel, as well to the women as men, to every one a cake of bread and a good piece of flesh and a flagon of wine. So all the people departed, every one to his house. Ending our reading at verse 19. As I go around different fellowships, I notice that some things are very familiar between one fellowship and another, but there's also other things that differ. And one of the things that differs from fellowship to fellowship is the style of worship. Some, like ourselves, is traditional. In fact, some have even taken it further where it is simply just a way of opening and closing a meeting, and it has no more significance than that. And they have relegated and reduced and diminished the biblical concept of worship. Worship is a primary reason why we meet, to lift our voices in praise. Of course, the other extreme is worship groups and worship bands where the congregation listen to a performance and they're not involved at all. And so as I thought of coming to Coleraine this morning, my question was, what is worship? What is worship? You have many different opinions, of course. One theologian says, worship is a believer's response to the love and mercy and grace of God. I would say amen to that. Another theologian said, worship on earth is the rehearsal for life in heaven. I would say amen to that as well. It is a rehearsal. Preachers will be redundant, and the singers will be primary in glory. I think my favorite is A.W. Tozer, the great theologian, who said, worship is to be personally and hopelessly in love with God. That's worship. To be personally and hopelessly in love with God. And if you use that definition, I must say that as I go around, there's very little true, real worship. And as I thought of worship in my mind, my thoughts turned to 2 Samuel 6, and there's lessons here that David teaches us on worship. And I have 4 wee points I just want to leave with you this morning. First of all is David's dream. We didn't read it this morning. Let me read it to you. The first 3 verses of chapter 7 of 2 Samuel, and you'll find his dream. It came to pass when the king sat in his house, and the Lord had given him rest round about from all his enemies, that the king said unto Nathan the prophet, see now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains. And Nathan said to the king, go, do all that is in thine heart, for the Lord is with thee. David's dream. His dream was to bring the Ark of the Covenant back to the central place where it should have always been, in Jerusalem. And you see, worship often starts with a dream, a longing to know God better. The 28th of August in 1963, which is 61 years ago now, Martin Luther King stood at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, 250,000 of a congregation in front of him, and he gave a speech that's been called the I Have a Dream speech. He says, I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will be not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. David had a dream. David had a longing. David had a passion to build a house for God, a place for the Ark of the Covenant that spoke of God's presence, that it might rest among the people. David's dream was refused. It was shattered in chapter 7 because he was a man of war. So instead, he gathered the gold and the silver and the bronze and the iron and the hewed stones and the cedar logs, so it would be all ready for his son Solomon to build. You'll read about that in 1 Chronicles 22. But in chapter 6, David's dream was still intact. He still had this longing. He didn't know that he would be refused. It still was his goal. And step 1 in fulfilling his dream was to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. This was Israel's greatest national treasure. It was its most sacred possession. You know the history of the Ark of the Covenant. Back in 1 Samuel 6, the Ark had been captured by the Philistines in war. It had been put into the temple of Dagon in Ashdod. It stayed there for 7 months, and God sent a plague. And so they wanted to get rid of the Ark of the Covenant. And so they put it on a truck, on a cart pulled by donkeys, and they set it loose. And the donkeys brought the Ark back to Israel. And it had sat in the home of Abinadab in Kirjath Jearim for almost 20 years. It had sat in the house of Abinadab. In it was the pot the golden pot of manna, and also the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, and Aaron's rod that budded. Those 3 items were in the Ark of the Covenant. And David's dream was to bring the Ark of the Covenant. They had got it as far as Abinadab's house. Now they wanted to bring it to its central place in Jerusalem. David's dream. Dear friend, I want to say to you this morning, I'm no Martin Luther King, but I have a dream. I have a dream that the gospel and the things of God might be at the center of our nation once again. I have a dream that Christ might have the primary place in our nation and in our fellowships and in our hearts. I have a dream that our fellowships will know harmony and unity and blessing. I have a dream that once again we might know the almighty power and presence and purity of God. I have a dream. I want to see God at the center of all that we do, and that true worship would be as common as breathing. I have a dream that the government legislation will once again be God glorifying. I have a dream that the Christian Institute, which do such sterling work, will be made redundant, no longer needed. I have a dream that Christ might be central. And when he is, we will cope with illness because he will be our great physician. And when he is depression, we'll be able to cope with depression because he'll be our comforter and guide. Whenever he's central, we'll be able to cope with worry because he'll be our wisdom and peace. Whenever he's central, we'll be able to cope with weakness because he'll be our source of strength. I have a dream. And it started with one individual. Started with David. We need to get the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. And I believe that my dream could start with an individual. Maybe in Coleraine Independent Methodist. And worship always starts with a dream, a longing, a desire for God. Not only David's dream, the second thing I want you to notice is David's design. You see, it was always the design of God that the Ark of the Covenant was to be carried on the shoulders of the Levites, the priestly tribe. This ark was so precious that it was not to be touched with human hands, and so Moses was given instructions that on the side of the Ark of the Covenant you were to put rings. And through those rings would be 2 poles. And so 4 groups of men of the Levite tribe would carry the Ark of the Covenant on their shoulders. And so no hand would touch the Ark of the Covenant. But David decided to break with old traditions. David decided that this was an exciting new dawn. This was a time for new vision and modern innovation. And so he designed a cart pulled by animals, verse 3. And they set the ark of God upon a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gibeah. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drave the new cart. He got the idea, of course, from the Philistines. That's exactly what the world did. That's exactly how they got it back in 1 Samuel 6, I think verses 7 and 8. And I imagine as they brought this new cart down to the home of Abinadab, and all of a sudden there appeared this new fancy method of bringing the Ark of the Covenant. I imagine some of the older people weren't happy. We've never done this before. We've never done it this way before. We've never used a cart before. We've never used a donkey before. But the young people were delighted with this new modern method. Tradition is boring. How are you going to reach the unsaved using methods they don't understand, they don't appreciate, and so we've got to bring it up to date. But David's design, though well-intended, did not consider either the command of God or the holiness of the ark. And in 2024, we need people with vision. We do need to reach a new generation. We do need to reach a young generation that's media-driven. Things change. But David learned to his cost that in the pursuit of vision and innovation, we must never forget the commands of God or the holiness of the things of God. David's dream, let's bring the Ark of the Covenant back to its center. Let's make the Lord's presence central in Israel again. What a dream. That's my dream. Hope it's your dream. David's design, he thought it'd be novel and have a new cart pulled by a donkey. Some would have loved it. God didn't. And David had to learn that he must never forget the commands of God or the holiness of the things of God. Point number 3. We have looked at David's dream. We have looked at David's design. Notice, please, David's disaster. Verse 6. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold on it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. They arrive at the threshing floor of Nachon. The ground was uneven. The people are singing, they're dancing, they're playing their instruments, according to verse 5. They're having a great celebration. The ark is coming home. We're going to Jerusalem. The Lord is going to be central once more. And the unevenness of the ground unsettles the oxen, and the ark becomes wobbly and rickety. And one of the drivers, called Uzzah, puts out his hand to steady the ark. And suddenly God strikes him dead. Is that not a wee bit severe? I mean, he was trying to do a good thing. It would be a disaster if the ark had fallen. It would have been a disaster if it had broken. I mean, he could see the unevenness, and he reached out just to steady it. I mean, surely you would have done the same, and so would I. And God smote him from heaven. And Uzzah dies on the spot, and rejoicing turns to mourning. It seems extreme. What did he do wrong? A lot of believers struggle with this passage because it seems so unfair. Well, Uzzah, we learn in verse 3, was the son of Abinadab. He was familiar with the ark. It had sat in his house for well nigh 20 years. It was a piece of furniture in the house. People would come to the door. Open the door. Hello. Tell me, is the Ark of the Covenant here? Yeah. Come on in. The front room. Come on in, you see. And whenever Uzzah put out his hand to steady the Ark of the Covenant, he was showing everybody how familiar he was with the things of God. How casually he could treat it. And I believe that's why God struck him down. Because the things of God had become commonplace. The things of God had become just another piece of furniture. He grew up with it. It was blasé. It didn't really mean much. Yes, it's in the front room there. Come on in, do you see it? And when Uzzah touched the ark, he was showing everybody how familiar, how casual he was with the Ark of the Covenant. Dear saint of God, could it be? Could it be that we have become over familiar and too casual with spiritual things. You see, if God acted as he did in 2 Samuel 6 and struck down those of us who were over familiar and casual and common with the things of God, the funeral directors would be packed and the graveyards would be full. I've sat in churches, on a pulpit, get up to speak and see people drinking cans of Coke. And some of them sitting on the backs of the seat with their feet where their bottom should be. I've sat and preached in meetings where there's a man cutting his nails and leaving them in a wee pile beside him. Preached in a place where a woman was doing her nails. I could take you to one church where a man was balancing his checkbook in the sermon. And suddenly all the things of God have become very commonplace. And the sense of the awe and the wonder and the holiness of God seems to be missing. The drive today is to be blasé and informal, a take it or leave it kind of attitude. But that indifference robs us of our impact as salt and light. We do church today without a sense of awe and wonder. We sing hymns on automatic mode without even considering the words that we know so well. We have relegated holiness of life to be optional. We have divided and fallen out and taken sides, and Satan is thrilled. We have created a God who fits in with our lifestyle. David realized his mistake. Look at verse 9. And David was afraid of the Lord that day, and said, how shall the ark of the Lord come unto me? He was afraid. That's the right kind of fear. Somebody said to me recently, the worst fear is realizing your passport isn't where you thought it was. And your heart sinks. No. The worst fear is a fear of God. A sense of the greatness of the majesty of God. The one who's so far above us, his ways are past finding out. David's dream: build the ark. Bring the ark of God back to Jerusalem. What a dream. Make God central in the middle of the nation again. David's design: let's be novel. Let's be new. Let's forget about the command of God. Let's forget about the way he commanded us to do it. Let's just do it the way the heathen do it. Let's get a cart and pull it with oxen. Disaster. Uzzah. Over familiar with the things of God. And he reached out to steady the ark. God struck him down. Fourthly, David's dance. Verse 14. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. For 3 months, the ark rested in the home of Obed-Edom, near where the threshing floor of Nacon was. And God very generously blessed the home of Obed-Edom for those 3 months. Of course he does, because God always blesses the home where Christ is at the center. And here the home of Obed-Edom, he didn't plan it, but they said, look, we need to put the ark somewhere. Can we put it in your house? Yeah, certainly. Bring it into my house. God blessed him, because God was central in his home, and he blessed his family and blessed him. After 3 months, David decides to try again. But this time, David has done his homework. This time he doesn't care about what the young people think or the modernists think, and a casual approach to it. No. He says, no, I'm going to follow the strict, clear instructions of the Mosaic law. We're going to get the poles. We're going to get the priests. And we're going to get them to carry it on their shoulders, because that's the way God decreed it, and that's what we're going to do. He went further. They went 6 steps, verse 13, and they stopped to make a sacrifice of a bull and a fatted calf. So he's making sure that he didn't overstep his position. He wanted to make sure that God was central. And finally, they reached the city of Jerusalem, the fulfillment of David's dream. And the weight and the significance of the occasion strikes the heart of David. The return of God's presence to the nation's capital. The moment is overwhelming. There's some weeping, there's some rejoicing and singing, some are applauding. And David forgets the dignity of being a king, and he starts to dance before the Lord. It says in verse 14, he danced with all his might. Now, I'm a Baptist. I have a problem with this. We don't do dancing. What's the point? Well, let me say this. This is not in the context of a service or a sacrifice. This is in the context of a celebration. It was not to put on a show. It was not to attract attention, but it was an outward expression of a deep love and passion for God's presence. And in an act of unashamed devotion, David worshipped with all his heart. Now, I'm not promoting dancing at all. Wouldn't be my thing. But would to God we had that outward expression of deep passion for God's presence and an unashamed devotion that made us worship God with all our heart. Verse 16, his wife Michal despised his display of extravagant love for the Lord. And can I promise you something? That if you display an extravagant love for God, there will always be people to dampen your enthusiasm. There'll always be people to throw cold water on it and say, well, that's not the way we do things. But God loves a heart that is passionate and in love with Him, that is excited about the things of God. I think of Mary in John 12, isn't it? She goes into the wee bedroom somewhere in Bethany and maybe lifts a wee rug. There's a wee wooden hidden box. She opens it up and there's her box of spikenard. Spike just means pure. Pure nard, very costly. That was her dowry if Mr. Right came along and offered marriage. Where would she get her dowry? Oh, no, don't worry about the dowry. I have my wee box. I'm ready. If he comes, I'm ready for him. If Mr. Right didn't come along, this was her capital. This was her savings. Don't worry about the stock exchange. Don't worry about no banks. I've got my spikenard. That's my wee nest egg. And if Mary was to die, Lazarus, Martha, don't you worry about me. You'll find that wee box. That'll pay for my burial costs. You see, all Mary's future was wrapped up in this wee box. If someone proposed marriage, if it was her savings, her capital, if it was her burial costs, she needed her wee box. She lifted it. She broke the seal. And she came out And she bowed down and on her knees before her Savior, and she anointed his feet with her spikenard. Oh. And the fragrance filled the house. Huh? Extravagant. Judas complained. Why was this not sold and given to the poor? Because he was a thief. You see, there's always someone to criticize. In fact, in every fellowship, there's always a Mary who wants to sit at the feet of the Master. There's always a Martha who loves to do the catering and make sure the pavlov is the right height and the vol au vents are fine. And there's always a Judas who will criticize. They're always there. I know you wouldn't have any Judases here, but many fellowships have them. The Marys, the Marthas, the Judases. Something else Mary did. She unbraided her hair and wiped the Lord's feet with her hair. Now, we don't get the significance of that in our culture. But that was not done in public. To unbraid your hair in public was a sign of low morals. You were a woman of the street. You unbraided your hair for your husband in the privacy of the bedroom. You didn't do it in public. But Mary has got past what people will say. And she unbraids her hair. And she wipes the Master's feet. Extravagant worship. David worshiped as he danced before the Lord, pleased the Lord. And we must maintain a scriptural, spiritual balance in our worship. But that is no excuse for half-hearted lukewarmness. David, in a day of worship, starts with a dream, follows God's design and God's pattern, sometimes leads to disaster when people get over familiar with the things of God and God acts in judgment. And David stands, an extravagant, outrageous, unrestrained love for God. Dear saint of God, this morning, I hope you have a dream. Follow God's design. Be careful you don't have a disaster by being over-familiar. But don't forget the dance. An extravagant, outrageous, unrestrained love for the God of heaven. May God bless these thoughts to our heart. Let's turn in our hymn book